And let's talk about some of the DEI stuff that's going on in Washington. We know that Trump signed some executive orders essentially banning DEI in federal agencies. What is your initial reaction to that swift action?
Well, I think it's really devastating. In the last 72 hours, we've seen a lot of things being stripped. And with that stripping is coming a real anxiety for so many different communities. Removing diversity, equity, and inclusion from contracts, from education, just from every sphere of life where it's totally necessary, it makes a lot of people feel like they're at a disadvantage. And it also leads to a presumption that we didn't have a history in which women and minorities were actually disadvantaged and didn't have the opportunity to go to school and get an education and also get the jobs that they actually deserved and they were merit-based. What we've been looking at more so and being focused is to make sure that we're not ignoring our past, that we're actually reconciling our past with our future. And what that means is that we can't just strip away certain legislation and have this assumption that, hey, now everything is merit-based. If we're going to actually create a merit-based society, we need to have merit-based policies. So I'm more than happy to work with the Trump administration so we can have these merit-based policies. But unfortunately, because right now we have this stripping without a replacement, there's going to be a lot of people who will lose their jobs because of that assumption that you didn't earn that job. But if we had substituted it, then maybe we would see more people who actually merited their job be in their job and not going with a lapse. And I think that's the real hurt. We've been talking to a lot of people in our communities, and they are actually in fear. They're very anxious. I mean, there are people who actually left their jobs, had their whole savings, and they created their businesses. And right now, some of their contractors are like, well, we don't know if we're going to go forward with your contract. Supply chain contractors. And right now, our economy is so vulnerable. American people are so vulnerable that, you know, if you don't get that contract, that you won't be able to feed your family and you probably won't be able to keep your house. There's so many workers right now who need to have that paycheck because groceries are expensive. Housing is expensive. Just living today is so expensive. Even paying for your children to have the substitute care that they might need in tutoring. We see so many kids right now who have disabilities. Compounding everything we've been going through is really the tough place we're in right now. Last Congress, the Republican Congress said that we couldn't fund community projects that worked with job skills training, which is tough too, because now we can't even train up our community members to get the jobs they're looking for. So that's where the anxiety is. And that's where we're really pushing to work with the administration to have merit-based policies as soon as possible. I think one thing that got lost in the diversity, equity, and inclusion conversation was the goal was to create pipelines for people who traditionally didn't have the opportunity for jobs. And traditionally, those people were women, minorities, and anybody who wasn't part of the, you know, the good old boys club. So then when you had Americans who had parents who worked in factories, who sacrificed and sent their kids to school and who dreamed of actually, you know, getting this job that can pay them and they can actually break through poverty, they were left out because they didn't know the right people. And so if we're reimagining America, removing diversity and equity and inclusion, let's reconcile it with a merit-based policy that creates pipelines for all Americans. And so that's what we're trying to lean in on and make sure that we're not ignoring the future and we're not putting anybody in harm's way, especially when it comes to financial stability and economic justice.
Now, there has been some state senators, one who is running for Congress right now, who says that DEI is racist.
Mm-hmm.
What is your reaction to that?
Absolutely not. Diversity, equity, and inclusion, if you look at the steps that were being taken, and if you look at the language of the law, there is no racism built in it. It's actually a policy that actually is trying to combat the history that we have and the uninclusive nature of the United States. And so if you have a problem with that policy, I think what we need to focus on is how do we keep moving forward towards being a better nation? So just stripping and removing it and saying it's racist, where does that leave us? We live in a world right now that is also moving and changing. I mean, we have to be agile. If you don't like that policy, what is the other policy? How do we make it more inclusive for you then? But removing it and ignoring our history, removing it and ignoring that we had a whole class of people who were stolen from one country, brought into the United States, who had all their labor and the money that they were deserving to be paid stripped from them, now thrown out there and said, hey, catch up, even though there was a stigma placed on them, to ignore the fact that women couldn't go to school, women couldn't actually get jobs and get paid what they were supposed to get paid. As of today, women still aren't getting paid what we're supposed to be getting paid. And to ignore that and say, okay, let's remove everything, now we're equal, it's a lie. It's a lie to all of us. And it's a disservice to all of us, because each of us, when we look in our families, we have women in our families. Now we have more minorities in our family. If we want to bring America up to the forefront and up to being first place, everyone has to thrive. Everyone has to actually be a participant. And that's where our pride comes in. I think our American dream, which we all buy into, that's why we're in the United States, means that everyone in the United States who works towards it can get there. So any person who's believing that diversity, equity, inclusion was not the best policy, let's work together and find the best policy then. But let's not ignore the past, and let's reconcile our past and our future and move this country forward.
And now there's talks about this sort of trickle-down effect coming to Florida. As you know, Governor Ron DeSantis, he has banned DEI at public colleges and universities. And now there are talks that this will expand into our local governments. Any programs that our local governments offer for DEI may go away. Do you see that happening here in Florida?
I think that's a real reality. And that's why I've been rushing and trying to push forward. What is the next policy? Come on, guys, what are we going to do? Let's get to work. I mean, when we were elected to these positions, we're elected to be thought leaders and policy makers. What is that policy? Let us not be contrarians, always saying, I don't like it, remove it, and we get stuck in park. If anything, we're moving, at this point, we're sliding backwards. How do we fulfill our responsibility to the American people right here and right now? Let's write a new policy. What is that? And reality is, I talked to so many people who had a policy, or they had a business deal they were doing, and now everybody's slowing down. The real reason why people are slowing down is because no one wants to make the wrong move. No one wants to be the person to say, I implemented this policy that no longer, or you knew was going to be stripped. So now you have businesses and business people who are anxious. And we don't have to live in a country where we're anxious. We can actually live in a country where, we're actually rewarded for taking risk and inviting people and investing in our communities. And so that's what I'm trying to push towards now, especially in Congress. Let's get more Republicans, more Democrats. Let's write this merit-based policy today so we can stop the anxiety.
And since I have you here, Congresswoman, the state of Florida is suing your family's medical health services company. Attorneys for your family's company have said that they were unable to verify this COVID overpayment that the state is alleging. Is that your response as well? I know you were the CEO at the time.
Well, right now I'm in my congressional capacity and we can't have that conversation. However, what I can say is that I think there was some misreporting that I signed invoices. As a CEO, I've never signed any invoices. So I want to make that clear.
Okay. This is just for accountability for your constituents because these questions keep arising.
Yes, but right now I'm in my office, but I just wanted to focus on the facts and the truth. And I know that the business is handling and the attorneys have spoken to people, but I just wanted to be very clear as we're going forward that, the truth is being said, which there was nothing that I was signing. And, at the right
But you
time,
did not sign any invoices.
In the right time, in the right venue, those things would be dealt. But as CEO, I never signed any invoices. I just want to clarify that because I heard there was a conception. And like I said, in the right time and right space. But right now I'm doing the people's work. And I'm fighting for the people. And I
would say that I would even argue that you're doing the people's work here because this was, this was your constituents.
Right now I'm doing the people's work. I'm fighting for the people. And right now the people are feeling anxious. So as they're feeling anxious, we're staying focused. We're fighting to make sure that everybody can live the American dream. And we're fighting to make sure that we all can move forward together. So I thank you so much for having this interview. And
thank you. I thank you for clarifying that you did not sign those invoices. So I'm wondering who did.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.